Are you impressed? I want to congratulate you for being here on time to witness the presentation of my favorite person from Seattle, actually from anywhere. Kevin Larson. He's with Microsoft Advanced Reading Technologies. That's a team of 7 people. It's a mixed bunch of 2 type designers, 2 scientists, 2 engineers, and 1 mathematician. So I guess that's already a sign you're in for a treat. This presentation was aimed at, or is aimed at, display manufacturers, and he put it together with Michael Bennett, right? So please welcome Kevin Larson.
Is this microphone? Oh, this microphone's working. Good. All right, so this presentation was done with my teammate Mike Bennett, who is a vision scientist on the team, and so much of the credit of the presentation should go to him, but he is not here today. The credit for the bad title all goes to me. It turns out that only some US people have any idea what that title was in reference to. It was a video game that became an internet meme because the translation for it was humorously bad, and so it got reused in all kinds of different things, but it didn't carry over to everybody so well. All right, so here is what we're going to do today. We are going to try to answer this question about a quote from Steve Jobs. Steve claimed that it turns out there's a magic number right around 300 pixels per inch, that when you hold something to 10 to 12 inches away from your eyes is the limit of the human retina to differentiate the pixels. Is he right? All right, we had an answer of no. Where did it come from? Do you want to say why?
Retina eye display, it's like 1 minute arch.
The retina display is 1 minute of arc. The resolution of the eye is 1 minute of arc. And because the 1 minute of arc is larger than a single pixel, then this statement is false.
I'm sorry, the human eye has a given resolution.
The human eye has a resolution, yeah.
That's like about a minute arc.
Okay.
So when you do the math, I did it several times. I never get it right, but it's about 10 to 12 inches is 30 centimeters, 25.
Okay,
Oh,
so
it's
based on what a cone in the retina could see, it's too
like
big.
1 minute arc, and you
All right.
about 40 centimeters,
Perfect.
you get like
Okay.
0.12 millimeters.
Anyone else have a different answer? Who says that Jobs is correct? He's Steve Jobs. He has to be right, right? Nobody thinks Steve Jobs is right? Really? Sai is going to go that he's right. I don't think Sai is being serious. I want someone else to tell me that Steve Jobs is right. In this room, nobody is going to say that Steve Jobs is right. He's always right. All right. Fine, Steve Jobs is wrong. How could that be? All right, so for the reasons that you're stating, this is absolutely correct. So things that Steve Jobs got right is he specified what's the size of the image that you're looking at. So he specified a 300 ATypI pixel, and he specified a distance. And the distance is a very important aspect of it, that you want to care about what's the visual angle from your eye to what can be seen. And so if you look at the center of the retina where we've got a lot of cones, 135,000 cones per square millimeter, and see how much how many cones a single pixel is going to land on, you're going to find that a single pixel of a 300 DPI display from 10 to 12 inches is going to land on about 16 cones. So from that perspective, it's definitely wrong, but he's Steve Jobs, so we're going to give him a little more credit than not having bothered to do the trig. Instead, we are going to start looking at visual perception characteristics and looking at specifically how vision scientists will study resolution in the eye. And so for that, you guys need to understand what cycles per degree are. And so what we care about is how many different alterations can you see in a single degree of vision. And so a single degree is roughly, if you put your arm out with your thumb up and close one eye, if your thumb blocks one white bar and one black bar, that would be 1 cycle per degree. If it blocks 2, it would be 2 cycles per degree. If it blocks only A black or A white, it would be half a cycle per degree. Yes, I'm in the way, sorry. So for somebody in the front row, how many lines is your thumb blocking? 2? 2 black and 2 white, or 1 black and 1 white? 1 to 2, okay. We're going to say that it's 1.5 cycles per degree for people on the front, and somebody in the back, how many is it blocking? 3? It would block 3 black and 3 white? 3 black ones? 3, okay. So 1.5 cycles per degree from the front, 3 cycles per degree from the back. That actually probably works out pretty well, that your distance is twice their distance. So distance is very important in cycles per degree, and front and back are going to be different. And here is the same thing for something that we would call a higher cycles per degree, higher frequency. So the numbers should jump up a lot. Does anyone have a number for me? 68. You didn't count. Human eyes are not so good at detecting 68 cycles per degree. 15 cycles per degree from here. Great. All right, so now we've defined what cycles per degree are, and what we want to test is, can people detect different resolutions? And so up on screen I have 2 figures, and I'm going to ask you guys, are they the same or are they different? They're different. Okay, good. So you guys can detect that there is a difference here between, I'm going to guess that this is between, say, 6 and 7 cycles per degree, without bothering to count. And the next 2 points are going to be obvious, but just so it's clear, what we're talking about here, not just vertical stripes, but can be resolution applied in any direction, so it can be horizontal, it can be diagonals. And what we really care about are, in this case, features of letters. So the vertical stroke of an E is the kind of letter feature that we're talking about when we're talking about these spatial frequencies, or the horizontal strokes of the E, or any of the characteristics of letters. All right, so there are 2 components to what we're going to talk about today. Spatial frequency, which is along this axis. So we've been talking about low versus high spatial frequency. And then in the second half of the talk, we're going to talk about contrast. But for now, we're going to ignore contrast and just work on that axis. So something to point out that will make more sense later is things that are below this line we're able to detect, so something that has very high contrast, we're able to see at low spatial frequencies and high spatial frequencies, but when we get to lower contrast, it becomes a problem. The debate around the Jobs quote has always been around what happens here. What is the point at which spatial frequency becomes high enough that we can't recognize it anymore? And we don't really know the answer to that, but it's somewhere in the 50 cycles per degree range, which is where the 300 DPI screen is from 10 to 12 inches. But we're going to find out why that doesn't actually matter. So here is a fairly complex Chinese character in Microsoft Yahoo, and at 10 point from 10 to 12 inches, this ends up being about 34 cycles per degree in this dimension. And as we saw, something that's at 34 cycles per degree with very high contrast is under this bar, and people can recognize all the features. So that's good. It turns out that it is possible to read Chinese characters. Go figure. It shouldn't be a surprise, so it's good that this matches up. If it didn't, we'd have a problem. All right. The problem comes when we take this 34 cycle per degree character and try to render it on a 96 dpi screen. So a 96 dpi screen, the width of a single pixel is 17 cycles per degree. So it's able to show something that is at this cycles per degree perfectly. 2 pixels is 8 cycles per degree, so that's right here. 3 pixels, 4 pixels, 5 pixels, so anything down here, it's able to show really well, but if you're trying to show something that's higher than 17 cycles per degree, the screen can't do it. And so you get a blobby mess. So let's look at a higher resolution screen. Here is 144. And at 144, we're still trying to show we've got a single pixel is now 25 or 26 cycles per degree, but that's still too low for what we're trying to show. So lots of the lines that we're trying to show here just, that's a line and that's a line, don't show up. Now when we jump to 192, we get a happy coincidence that a single pixel is roughly what we're trying to show in this character. And so sometimes it works out really well. This line aligns perfectly with the grid and shows up great, but it's not exactly right, so it starts getting shifts and some of the lines don't land nicely on the pixel grid. So we're getting closer, but not perfect. Here's where it starts to get interesting. So now we've got a 250 dpi monitor, and a single pixel can show something that is 43 cycles per degree. So something that's higher than what we're trying to show. But we've got a single pixel here at 43 cycles per degree and 2 pixels at 22 cycles per degree. But what we're trying to show is something that's about a pixel and a half. And so that works out not great for anything here. We can show 1 pixel lines great, but if that 1.5 pixel happens to fall between lines like it does here, then you're stuck right in the middle and you don't get that high contrast. And now we'll jump to the jobs 300 dpi. We're out to a single pixel is 51, 52 cycles per degree. And it may be the case that if we're alternating 1 pixel on, 1 pixel off, we'd end up with a screen of gray that we couldn't actually detect the features. But it doesn't matter because that's not what we're trying to show. We're trying to show things that are less than 50 cycles per degree. So in this case, 34 cycles per degree, where 2 pixels is well below this, 1 pixel is well above it. And so we have mismatches between what we care about showing, this 34 cycles per degree line, and what the screen's able to do. So it's the gaps between 1 and 2 pixels and 2 and 3 pixels that is the problem with trying to get a perfect resolution screen. It's not how far out 1 pixel is. And so this is obviously important for legibility for Chinese, but this actually applies to Latin as well. So lowercase I, people would assume that's a pretty easy case for rendering. It is a single line and single dot. And so at 96 dpi, if we want to render this, we can render something that everybody will agree is an eye. But it's not necessarily this eye. So this is the Kandara eye with these nice curves to it. And at 96 dpi, what we show is a rectangle and a square dot on top. Everyone will recognize it as an eye, but it's not this eye. And as we get higher and higher resolutions, what that's allowing us to do is rendering more fidelity of this kind of curve. And so we're trying to show things that are going from very smoothly from 1 to 2 pixels, or at 500 dpi, it's from 4 to 5 pixels. So on this side of the curve, even at 500 dpi, what we're doing is changing the shading just along that pixel. So we're not using resolution at all in order to show the Kandara eye, even at 500 dpi. This is a good point for a break, if there are questions, because next we're going to switch to contrast. Yeah. The second mic is not on.
Okay, okay. So this is reading distance, like 12
This is
inches?
assuming the 10 to 12 inches of
12
jobs,
inches.
but
Okay,
the
so
numbers change a little if you shift distances.
So mobile displays.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So just a little esoteric question. So you're trying to render 35 cycles, 33 cycles?
34 in that Chinese character.
34. So couldn't we reverse the Nyquist theorem that says the frequency of spatial? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So couldn't we reverse it and say we need to render 34, so we'd go above twice the cycle. So we'd have perfect resolution at 65 plus.
So if you cared just about that character, that would work great. But
okay.
so for that Chinese character, we also have light and semi-light versions of it, which
At 10 points.
which give you 10 points. Sure.
Oh.
It's not unlike Latin that you have
But
different weights to it, and so each of the weights are going to have a different frequency.
But couldn't that be the base formula to do, like, we need at least this resolution?
Would you be happy in your Latin fonts if you were told you can only use one weight ever?
I've lived with displays like 72 to 96 dpi until now.
Sure, and hinting technologies are ways of pushing the lines around to make it work for what we have available. But it's not, the question is this beyond human perception? And no. No.
Okay.
All right. For the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to be doing a demo, and I need all the lights in the room turned off. And if people could close their laptop screens to make it perfectly dark, this will work out best. All right, so we're going to have to wait just a minute as people's eyes adapt to the black. And there's a little bit of light coming from the screen, but not too bad. Ideally, we'd wait 5 minutes, but we're going to jump ahead on this. So if I were to wait 5 minutes, what would happen is this circle here would appear perfectly white to you. But I'm going to guess that that appears a little bit gray. Yeah? Okay. So we've got a gray circle up on screen. And what I'm going to do is not change that gray circle at all, but I'm going to put a white circle around it. Now, when I put that white circle around it, does the color of the gray circle change to you? Okay. Physically, it's not. It's the exact same circle here. I'm just adding white around it. So your perception of that middle circle is changing a little bit. All right, so everyone agrees we've got a white circle surrounded by a gray dot, right? All right. I'm going to do something crazy now. No? Gray dot surrounded by a white circle, sure. Okay. What I'm going to do now is put even a whiter circle without the red. If anyone wants these slides, I can send them to you. But the red doesn't help us. All right, so now we've got something that's whiter than what we had before, right? It hasn't, so the actual colors of the inner circles haven't changed at all. This is still the same color that it was before. I've just added a white circle around it. So something that you previously recognized as white, you're now recognizing as gray. And we've got a new white here. So what I'm going to do now is put another white circle around it. And the previous circle now looks gray, and that middle circle is starting to look very gray, right? Ah, okay. You're never going to guess what's coming next. Oh, there's white again. You guys are graphic experts. You should recognize white, right? All right, so we've got now a white circle here. None of the inner ones have changed, but they are now starting to appear more gray. All right, next up, another white circle. So that's now become white. The inner one has become grayer, and the middle one is starting to get really dark. And Another one. More white. All right, so my point here, and the lights can come back up now, is that contrast is not something that is an absolute in the world. It is something that is very relative to our perception. So we look at what is the blackest thing in our environment and the whitest thing in our environment and determine that that is black and white. So you may feel that you can recognize something that's high contrast, but it is variable depending on both your eyesight and the characteristics of the environment. All right, another question for you guys. Nope, not a question yet. All right, so this is the chart that I showed earlier of going low to high spatial frequencies and low to high contrast. And what you should recognize here is that there are the lines, they do go all the way to the top for all of these bars. There's going to be some projector problems here, but the lines do actually go all the way top in the original image. Hopefully they are in the projection. But your perception of these lines won't go all the way to the top, that we are better at perceiving lighter levels of contrast at some spatial frequencies than we are at others. So which lines go highest for you guys? Middle? Here? Okay. All right, now front of the room. Front of the room is saying more this way. There? Okay. Back of the room? Back of the room's telling me more over here. Yeah. Yep, because spatial frequencies change by front of the back of the room, and so the back of the room is going to be able to see higher there, front of the room is going to see higher over there. And so hopefully this starts to make a little more sense right now that we are really good at seeing things that are about 3 to 4 cycles per degree, and as we get to higher spatial frequencies, we need more contrast in order to be able to recognize it. So here is a demo of that. Who can see the E on screen? Everyone? Who can see both E's on screen? How about now? Yeah. And final one, everyone can see this one? Good, okay. All right, so here is high contrast E, low contrast E, which on my screen that's very easy to see, but I can barely see it here. So there are 3 situations at least that are going to result in these kinds of differences between high and low contrast. One is if you have a really high quality monitor that has a high backlight and a very thin screen that has few reflections on it, that'll give you a darker E. 2 is environment. So if you take your phone and bring it from this nice dark room to outside in direct sunlight, what happens to the screen? It becomes hard to see, so you're reducing the amount of contrast in it because the ambient light has become so bright that your perception of contrast, you need the white on screen to be as white as the sunlight, and our screens can't do that today. And then the third way that we get these kinds of contrast differences are age-related, that as we get older, less light actually gets through our eyes. So when we're 20, a lot of light gets through our eyes. By the time we're 40, about half that light still gets through our eyes. By the time we're 60, 20% of that light goes through our eyes. So as we age, we are naturally getting this lower contrast text. So here's what it looks like on the diagram. So here, we've got a high spatial frequency, high contrast. Here, high spatial frequency, low contrast. And this can go beyond our ability to perceive it. And putting this all together, I've got 2 fun demos, unless I'm over time. What is my time? Good. All right, so here we've got blends of spatial frequency and contrast. And who do you guys see in the big picture? Einstein, right? So in this one, so these 3 are the same picture, of course. In this one, we're able to see these high frequency lines, and while there are color blotches here, they're low frequency, so we don't pay they're too low of a frequency. They're below that 2 cycles per degree, so we don't pay as much attention to it and see all the high spatial frequency features. But down here, who do we have? Marilyn Monroe. We can't see any of those same high spatial frequency features, so we're just seeing the blobs of white, which are now in the range that we're good at detecting. And this also applies to, we can do the same kind of demo with letters. The small and big ones are the same images, just at different scales. And what letter pops out to you at the large size? F. What letter pops out at the small size? D. Nice. So right in the middle, E for some people. Okay, so there is a D, E, and F here, and if we go up and down, we'll find a point for each of you where you'll see best the D, E, and F, even though they're all obviously overlaid on top of each other. All right, so our takeaway point is that you guys were right, that Steve Jobs was wrong. And so to get the resolution that we really want from screens, we need to be able to get the continuous spatial frequencies between 0 and 50. It doesn't matter if we're able to get 100 cycles per degree for that sake of 100 cycles per degree, because we're never going to see that. We want the 100 cycles per degree so we can fill in the gaps at the smaller sizes, is what's really important. And then contrast is just important as a resolution. For designers in the room, if you want to make sure that something is high enough contrast to see it, I can't emphasize often enough that we want larger sizes and higher contrast in order to move to this side of the curve so people can see it. People with better vision and better situations, having your computer, a high quality computer in a darker room, will give you the perception of very high contrast. But for other people that take a poor screen outside, suddenly the contrast all goes away. And I guess that is my third point. Thank you. Do I have time for questions?
Why not?
I have time for why not questions. Thomas, what do you have? It's coming.
Well, that was awesome. Thanks. I keep on seeing advice in various places saying that, oh no, black on white, or for that matter, pure white on black, is bad and is not as legible. Are there any particular situations or particular subgroups, for example, dyslexics, for whom maximum contrast is bad advice? Or is this sort of an old wives' tale, as it were?
There's one situation where, so if you have cataracts, cataracts cause light distortions through the eye. So in that particular situation, you do want white text on a black background to minimize the light reflections within the eye.
That's not lowering contrast, though.
Right. So contrast, yes, you always want contrast. You get discomfort problems, though, if the light that's coming from your task area, which would be your screen, is more than 3 times the brightness of the environment. So if you are in a room like this and you turn on your laptop at full brightness, you can end up with something that's 20, 30 times brighter, and that will feel uncomfortable, and you don't want that. So we do need computers to pay attention to the environment, and if you're in a dark room, turn it down so it's a maximum of 3 times as bright in the environment. But if you're in a situation like you are in a bright room or outdoors, there is no limit to how bright you want the screen. You always want high contrast, as I have defined contrast.
Right. So and presumably it is better then for the designers to use very high contrast and the user to then turn down their screen if necessary.
That is correct.
You showed us the slide with the eye, the different eyes.
Different eyes. The first slide.
I, letter I.
The letter I.
Here, okay. Now, I'm always curious about the form. The pixel is square. Now, I'm not sure about that. That's the optical, or the light, and the light beam is round, isn't it? So,
On a LCD screen, it's a white pixel is not white. It's 3 rectangular RG and B stripes, but they are rectangular and not round. With CRT displays, the light beam was round.
mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Because I wasn't sure whether it's really
Pixels
square
are
or-
a whole
or-
pixel
or
in
round.
RGB triad is square on modern screens. In CGA screens in the 80s, they were other shapes. They weren't quite square. But in the last 20 years, they've all been square.
Because I remember
Some exceptions.
the type designer and teacher Gürtler, and do you know him? André Gürtler. He worked for Adrian Frutiger in the studio. He worked at the old days. He worked for Bobst Graphic in Lausanne, Switzerland, and he designed his alphabet with round dots, in contrast to the other ones where had square dots in the
Yep.
cathode ray tube history.
Yep.
So
No,
that's-
and there's reason to want display shapes other than square, but we've had square lately. Thank you.
All right. Thanks very much. In order for keeping the time. Your applause.